that you've got your parachute and parachute release made, the final consideration is how to rig everything up so that it reliably stays in the plane on takeoff and climb to altitude and reliably leaves the plane when you tell it to. The most important part to carrying and dropping cargo, whatever the cargo may be, is to ensure that the cargo rests inside or outside your plane at or slightly forward of the center of gravity, so that when you put the cargo inside, it doesn't change the overall center of gravity of your aircraft. And therefore, other than losing the weight from the cargo when it's deployed, the plane will behave similarly before and after the cargo is dropped as far as flying characteristics. When designing and making your parachutes and using a bridle of parachute cord or whatever you like to use, it's important to consider the length of this bridle when using this deployment technique. You want your parachute to come out the back of the aircraft and be pulled sufficiently into the slipstream that it can fully inflate in order to pull the cargo out of the plane quickly and cleanly and not linger in there and disrupt the center of gravity. So I recommend this bridle be about 2 diameters of the parachute. So if you're using a 30-inch diameter parachute, a 60-inch bridle from the attachment point to the cargo is usually adequate. When designing your aircraft and your rigging deployment system, be really careful to ensure there is nothing to snag inside the aircraft. There are no protrusions, no irregularities that could grab the parachute and or the cargo on its way out. When orienting the cargo inside the aircraft cargo bay, always be certain that the bridle is attached facing rearward so that when it extracts the cargo, it will extract it straight back, instead of, for example, putting it in like this in such a way that it will go in easily, but when it goes to extract, it will tend to want to turn the cargo sideways and potentially lock it inside the cargo bay. That would result in disaster. Naturally, when you go to cram all this stuff into your plane like this, make sure that it will freely come right back out. I've been guilty of excessively loading the cargo bay with too much payload, and if it snags on the way out, it can cause big problems.
You got it, yeah!
Now the critical part to securing your cargo inside the plane is to make it a strong enough means so that it stays in place while taking off and flying, but will release the cargo upon deployment of the parachute itself. I like to use these little 1x1 centimeter rare earth magnets. They're available from a variety of places online. They cost about 30 cents each, and they're very strong. And what I do is to hot glue or CA glue them either inside the aircraft if it's a smallish one, or onto a deployment pallet such as this piece of foam board. Depending on the size of your cargo, you may use more than one of these magnets. And I glue them down and then glue or tape a similar magnet to the cargo. In this case it's just a 1-ounce block of wood, and then that cargo is just stuck inside the plane or onto the deployment pallet here so that it's secure enough not to fall off on bumpy takeoffs or maneuvering in flight, but when the parachute is deployed it will yank it right off and out the back of the aircraft. Now if you have a smallish piece of cargo like this, typically one magnet on each with the correct polarity so it sticks and not repels is adequate. But if you have a long piece of cargo like a small vehicle or doll or something that will potentially twist this way and that and potentially hang up on the way out, it's best to actually put 2 magnets so that it holds the cargo in alignment, so when it's deployed it will come straight out rather than turning and pulling out sideways and jamming up in your tailgate. For larger, heavier, or regularly shaped cargo like this 500 ml water bottle, I'd like to use Velcro. Now Velcro can be a double-edged sword. It can be very strong applied in certain directions and hold too securely for deployment purposes, but when applied in such a way that the deployment extraction force peels it apart, it can be very effective. So what I like to do is use this deployment pallet here, held into the aircraft with rare earth magnets, and I would put the cargo under the loop part of the Velcro and use a piece of the hook Velcro and apply it facing rearward in the plane in a loop configuration like that, so that the cargo is held securely in the plane for takeoff, but that when the parachute is deployed, it will yank the Velcro right off. Often it will pull off both pieces and allow the cargo to fall off. If for some reason the Velcro does not release from one end of this, but releases from the other, it'll allow it to pull itself free of the aircraft. And as a third backup mechanism, the pallet is held into the aircraft with magnets, and so the magnets can actually allow the whole pallet to be pulled out. The goal is to provide several backup mechanisms so that you don't end up with your parachute in tow behind your aircraft. For this version, I've used a plastic gift card, hot glued and taped down to a piece of foam board and a strip of Velcro here. Now for truly huge and heavy cargo like these water bottles you've seen me drop, a 30-inch parachute may not cut it, and you may need to use a very large, like this 60-inch diameter parachute to be the actual working main parachute. The drawback is that this is 4 times bulkier, larger, and heavier, and so that if this is deployed from the rear of the aircraft, it's very challenging to get this to hold within the release mechanism. Also adds a fair amount of weight far aft in your aircraft, and the parachute itself can actually change the center of gravity of the plane. So what is preferable in that case is to use a smaller, lighter pilot chute, which is attached by a bridle to the main parachute and passes through the apex of the main parachute here with the zip tie and the knot inside. It goes through the inside of the main parachute and exits the bottom through the netting here, and then finally by the bridle to the payload itself. The reason for passing the bridle through the main parachute is twofold. One is it allows you to pull down the apex towards the bottom, and that flattens the top of the canopy and allows it to catch more air. It's called an apex pull down and is used in military parachutes. The second reason is that it distributes the extraction force from the pilot chute through the main parachute to the cargo extraction, rather than applying that yank force through the fabric of the main parachute and the seams that you've glued are right there, and so that it distributes the force right through the bridle to the cargo that you're dropping. So for this arrangement, I would have the cargo and the main parachute both secured with the Velcro strap here on the deployment pallet, which I would slide inside the aircraft. Then the pilot parachute would be packed as the standard way, like that, and put into the deployment mechanism so that when it is released out of the back of the aircraft, it pulls the release off and allows the main parachute to fall out of the back of the aircraft and continues to extract the cargo with it, just like that. I have to emphasize, when you're doing a setup like this, you need to be very diligent about thinking about how everything deploys step by step, slowly, and test it over and over and over again on the ground so you're satisfied that it will always deploy the way that you intend. Little things like putting the cargo behind the parachute can make or break the deployment, when in fact you want to put the main parachute aft and the cargo forward, both for balance purposes and for deployment. Play with this, experiment, try it over and over, make sure that it works on the ground. When you go flying, have fun, and be sure you share some videos with us. You can also have a lot of fun with cameras, attaching it either inside the aircraft, watching the cargo leave, or you can actually attach it to the cargo yourself. I like to use this little $20 gumstick camera. If you dare, you can put a GoPro on there. I've even had a friend drop his iPhone under one of these parachutes with the video camera going, and it worked well. The main advice I have there is, if you attach it to the cargo, is to put it on the top side, so that if you have a malfunction or if it's just too heavy for the parachute, that the cargo hits first, not the camera like this, or you could crush your camera.